Adolescence is a time where individuals face numerous challenges. Today we'll be discussing the developmental issues faced by Khyl from the case study. So in regards to brain development issues that Khyl from the case study is going through, I'm going to talk about four in particular. So the first one is through adolescence, they're going through synaptogenesis, which is the formation of synapses, which is where messages actually pass from one neuron through dendrites into another neuron and back and forth. And so the forming of these synapses, there's often an overproduction within adolescence. So that brings me on to the next point of synaptic pruning, which is also known as the use it or lose it principle. So Khyl enjoys sports and arts, as said in the case study. So these synapses are probably strengthened and they're more ingrained within her neural pathways, whereas she does not enjoy maths and science. So because she's struggling with these, she may not have these synapses as ingrained within her neural pathways. So pruning would refer to the dendrites actually withering away so that these synapses are actually closing off and they're not as ingrained in the neural pathways, as I said before. The third one would be myelin sheath development, which is the development of myelination around the axon of a neuron, and this refers to actually speeding up the processes and speeding up the messages passing from neuron to neuron. So in regards to sport and art, she might be able to process the information quite quickly and pass back and forth between neurons because she enjoys it and these synapses are truly ingrained within her neural pathways. And so the last developmental issue would be the frontal lobe development is actually delayed, so that this is involved with impulse control, multitasking, and planning ahead. So this might actually explain as to why Khyl is starting to hang out with an older crowd, and she might be being involved with taking illicit drugs, as it says in the case study, as Steinberg outlines that adolescents are vulnerable to risk-taking, and in particular, they are involved in risk-taking when they're in a group setting.
I'm just going to discuss the social development issues Khyl is suffering. Khyl is withdrawn and doesn't share personal information. She lacks the ability to communicate with peers her own age. This may be because she is maturing at a faster rate. Her early maturation may also explain why she hangs around older students. Khyl feels she can relate to these adolescents because she physically belongs.
In terms of her cognitive development issues, according to Piaget's stages of cognitive development, Khyl may be transitioning into the formal operation stage, whilst her peers may still be in the concrete operational stage. So this could lead to Khyl possibly having more common with the older students, which is why she enjoys spending more time with them. Khyl also notes that she's struggling to keep up with her maths and science lessons and often forgets the content. So this struggle to process and retain her information may be due to a cognitive overload. It may also be due to the lack of automaticity, which requires experience more so than age, which could be a consequence of Khyl not showing up to class anymore. Physically, Khyl is maturing earlier than the rest of her peers from the onset of puberty, so this may result in her having more body image issues and a lack of self-confidence. This may also be another contributing factor as to why she is spending more time with older students in similar situations.
In regards to strategies to help with brain developmental issues, Blakemore suggests that education should be aimed around parts of the adolescent brain that are still needing more work to fully mature. So this would see teaching strategies be aimed at the frontal lobe or the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is involved in impulse control, multitasking, and planning. But also at the same time, focus needs to be on social cognitive skills, such as perspectives and understanding other people's opinions. By aiming education at these parts of the brain, such as the frontal lobe, this may see improvements in the neural pathways and synapses for this part of the brain. The importance of this strategy will also be engagement of students, ensuring that work is challenging in order to stimulate Khyl's brain and use the neural pathways or synapses before they go through synaptic pruning. One of the positives would be that this can potentially decrease synaptic pruning via the student actually being engaged within the information, and this can have positive influences on the frontal cortex of the brain. So that adolescents are strongly influenced by their environment when they're going through brain development. So giving them this positive environment and teaching in order to develop the frontal cortex of the brain can have positive influences on that cortex. So Stuss in 2013 explained that adolescence is a sensitive period, and by creating a good environment around the adolescents, we are able to nurture the frontal lobe through this sensitive period.
In relation to social development, the combination of problem solving together with group work allows students to increase their capability in the development of academic language proficiency and also improving intergroup relations by increasing trust and friendliness, as written by Cohen and Lowton. By giving students a common goal, they begin to work together cohesively in order to achieve this objective. The result often increases friendly ties and positive intergroup relations due to productivity of the group and the overall achievement. This can then increase Khyl's social development. As her relationship between peers increases, her ability to discuss personal information with students her own age will rise, and the feeling of segregation from peers her own age will diminish. Group work encourages students to remain involved and up to date with their work by allowing them to discuss problems regarding schoolwork among a small group of peers. This then allows students to begin to feel comfortable with one another, which results in each student's ability to answer and ask questions confidently significantly higher. Kayla's attendance rate could increase immensely as she begins to ask questions regarding the work, which then gives her a greater range of opinions and examples provided by her peers, thus giving her a larger chance of understanding the criteria. Kayla's attendance rate could dramatically begin to increase as she begins to obtain improving results. A negative that may occur is that a student may begin to do all the work, and someone like Kayla will tend to shy away from this discussion.
In terms of cognitive development, De Jong suggests that teachers should design instructional systems that optimize the use of working memory capacity and avoid a cognitive overload. This intrinsic load can be achieved by a strategy called scaffolded learning. Scaffolded learning involves using a range of temporary support structures to assist students in learning new tasks and concepts. Teachers should also avoid placing any extraneous loads or non-essential and confusing information on students by using techniques such as segmenting. The positives of this strategy include the reduction of high element interactivity, which will lead to processing information automatically and by sensory memory. Khyl explains that managing the working memory load is a key issue for successful learning. By reducing the extraneous cognitive load as much as possible, teachers will minimize the amount of Kayla's working memory required for dealing with information that is extraneous to learning. As a consequence, Parson et Fango state, Khyl will acquire sufficient information in her long-term memory to ensure that she can function without the limitations of working memory when dealing with novel information. Plas explains that reducing cognitive load may be problematic, as there is a level of difficulty in measuring cognitive load. Cognitive load is personal and can involve numerous extrinsic factors, such as home issues, rather than just the load placed upon Khyl by her teachers.
Though adolescence is a difficult time, by identifying Kayla's developmental issues and possible strategies, her teachers will be able to prevent and assist Khyl through her adolescent development.
So in regards to my own personal reflection on adolescent development theory and the whole unit in general, what I found really important from this unit is actually the idea of student engagement and not only just student attendance. I believe that this is probably the most important aspect I've come across in this unit, and I believe that we need to individually stimulate each child, not only just the whole classroom teaching them as one, but teaching to each individual student. And in regards to a teaching strategy that I may use a strategy such as differentiated instruction to do so. So differentiated instruction would see me in a classroom teaching to individual needs and individual abilities, whether they be low or high or anywhere in between. And this can actually may be able to help the reduction in synaptic pruning of each individual, as we're focused on challenging each student to their own abilities. So in regards to this strategy, it's actually a bit more sensitive to each student as well, as you're focused on their abilities, what's going to work for them individually. And in regards to PDHPE, my own KLA, a strategy, the best example I can think of is if we were in a classroom and I was teaching basketball, and I had a student that was a state basketball player. I'm not going to teach that student the fundamentals of basketball, such as the fundamentals of shooting a basketball, whereas I may teach the rest of the students such. But obviously this student might need something a bit more advanced, so I might separate drills for this student so that they're not going to be bored and they're not going to be engaged. They're not going to not be engaged within the work. So yeah, I think that a strategy such as differentiated instruction and focusing on student engagement is really pivotal to help adolescent development.
The concentration model has derived from all adolescents as each teenager undergoes similar physical, mental and social challenges. An important piece of information learned from this subject regarding the concentration model is the acknowledgement of adolescence being a difficult time for all students. They undergo negative family relationships, emotional changes and peer relationships, demonstrating a high chance of students becoming unfocused. Adolescents' cognitive changes involve brain functioning and storing, such as the ability of short-term working memory only allowing 5 to 9 elements of information to be stored. Having such minimal storage demonstrates the importance of concentrating during class and obtaining necessary elements of information to be remembered. Having activities that are low element interactivity decreases confusion, allowing for step-by-step demonstrations and examples. As an aspiring teacher, it is important to understand what aspects of adolescence development will influence my future teaching practice. Adolescents undergo emotional changes, family discrepancies, physical and social changes that all affect the way in which students concentrate. A teaching practice that has been influenced by the student's cognitive development and physical, social and emotional changes is the idea of becoming an approachable teacher. This allows students to be comfortable with discussing questions regarding the content while keeping a student focused. By understanding adolescence and therefore understanding hardships that occur during pre-adulthood, this helps influence me as a teacher to continually relate content back to the student from past experience and stories in order to keep a student engagement high, thus increasing student concentration. The brain development of adolescents demonstrates low attention spans, and as a teacher, I must continually stimulate the students with mind maps, class discussions and quizzes to increase student interaction and excitability. The concentration model displays numerous teaching strategies that help students to remain focused while engaging with group discussions. Having each student setting both short-term and long-term goals allows each adolescent to continually work hard and strive to achieve their goals, giving the student a sense of achievement. Teaching PDHPE provides numerous ways in which all learners can be stimulated. For example, learning how to sling an injured person's arm. A kinesthetic learner uses their hands to physically sling the person's arm. A visual learner observes me as a teacher slinging a person's arm, and an auditory learner listens to how I explain it in detail of me slinging the person's arm.
Adolescent development theory, research and practice can influence my teaching approach by helping me to recognize and be aware of the numerous challenges that my future students will be facing. My personal teaching approach will be based on compassion and understanding of all the developmental changes occurring in my students. The use of research can influence my personal practice by assisting me in identifying developmental issues and ways to assist my students, resulting in an evidence-based practice in my classrooms. As part of this unit, I have learnt that as a teacher, it is my role to foster this development and assist students in this difficult time. Adolescents are going through a very difficult time and often confusing time in their lives, and it is essential that as teachers we keep this in mind. The knowledge gained by completing this unit can be used to inform specific strategies used to support students. Having an informed understanding will result in awareness of issues and then strategies that can be implemented that will meet the needs of these students. This knowledge can be used to identify what issues and responses are necessary and what other professionals or parents and caregivers should be involved in the decision to implement certain strategies. It also allows me to recognize that the correct way to approach issues is with a degree of understanding, sympathy, and caution. In relation to PDHPE, this knowledge about adolescent development can be used to develop strategies that ensure interaction, engagement, and learning of students in classes. For example, by knowing that reducing the cognitive load can improve learning, when teaching a skill such as a handstand in gymnastics, I can use the strategy of segmenting to break down movement skills rather than providing instructions as a whole.